everyone. Welcome to Empower webinar. Today, I'm so excited to be presenting to you personal branding webinar and how you can sell yourself as international students and recent graduate. My name is Pat. I am a founder of Empower International Students. I came to Canada as international students, like a lot of us on the call. I'm originally from Thailand. I was born and raised there, and I moved here for my university. So my story as international students, I struggle a lot, especially with how to sell myself confidently and not being too much, not being too little, and really hard to find somewhere in between. So with that, I'm very excited to bring on Merryn, who's our speaker for today. She has a jam-packed agenda today, and I'm sure that you will be learning a lot from her, and also have a chance to really participate in some of the questions that we will be putting out as well. So next, I will be introducing Antonio, who would actually be my co-host for tonight. So if you have any questions, feel free to type into the chat. But Antonio, feel free to pop up, kind of introduce yourself.
Okay, hi, perfect. Thank you, Pat, and welcome everyone. Just want to spend a couple of words to introduce myself. For those of you that might not know me, my name is Antonio. I am the Career Services Facilitator at Empower, and I am beyond excited to see how our community has been growing day by day in the last 4 months. In the last 4 months, I believe we have grown, we have doubled our numbers, and our community is growing more and more. And it is a great pleasure and honor to introduce our guest, Merryn Roberts-Handley. Merryn has an international experience that goes throughout her entire life. She was born in the UK, raised in Vancouver, Canada, and she went on to study in the United States as an international student, where she presently lives and works in beautiful Portland, Oregon. Having been an international student herself, Merryn knows very well all the struggles that we all have been through. From how difficult it is to adapt to a new country where you do not have that network, the pre-existing network that gives you that support, to the difference of adapting to a new culture, new rules, new norms, and how difficult it is to market ourselves when we maybe come from a context, family background, or even a cultural background that does not promote that much, that being outspoken and that being self-confident. Merryn is also the founder of a career service firm called Made to Hire, and the author of a successful book titled Made to Hire: How to Get the Job That You Really Want. The book itself helps people to define their personal brand, and I highly recommend this book to all of you. This will be a great value for all of you guys because it is a step-by-step guide to learn how to really market ourselves to get the dream job that we all really want. And today we have the privilege and the luckiness to have an exclusive workshop from Merryn tailored to us, to Empower, where we can learn how to, first of all, understand who we really are, how to storytell ourselves with genuineness and confidence, and be able to frame that sort of personal story into a marketable package that we can present to our potential employers. But I just want to stress that it's not just that, because the skills that we're gonna learn today, they're gonna go far beyond their skills that we're going to bring in our future job once we secure that position. They are skills that are going to be useful for us when we're going to be in the workplace, because they relate to personal development and the development of leadership skills and the ability to develop positive relationships with our coworkers. As such, without further ado, thank you again to all of you for joining us today. And thank you, Merryn, for teaching us and mentoring on such a key topic. And I will pass it to you. Thank you so much.
Antonio, thank you so much for the lovely welcome. You are such an impressive speaker. And Pat, thank you so much for welcoming me into the Empower International family here. So this is such a pleasure to be here, and so fun to see so many faces, so many new faces to me. It's such an honor to get to share with all of you the teachings that I teach in my book and my course, and to my students here where I live in Oregon. So tonight's workshop is going to hopefully really challenge the way that you guys think, and I want it to be interactive. So if I say something and you have a question about it, you can raise your hand with that feature on Zoom, or put something in the chat, and if I miss it, I'm sure Antonio or Pat will flag me and say, we've got a great question. Okay, so I want you guys to get a ton out of this, because as Antonio said, I know what it's like to be an international student. I know what it's like to try to find work in a foreign country. So I feel you. And what I'm going to share tonight is what I've learned over 20 years working in business, the ups, the downs, but I'm giving you my best advice to help you get where you're trying to go professionally faster. So I hope you're going to get a lot out of it. First thing I want to start by saying is that I want to challenge you to think about yourself a little bit differently. I want to challenge you to think about yourself as a brand. So we think about brands, and words for me that come to mind are things like Adidas or Sony or Tesla or Starbucks, right? These established brands that have logos and all this fancy marketing, and they do a great job, right? But you are actually your own brand, and in fact, the most important brand in your world. And the more that you can start thinking about yourself as a brand that needs to be carefully managed, the more successful you're going to be at landing that dream job that you're going after. So, for me, it's this transition. I think about myself, 20 years ago, I think about myself being on one side of a cliff, essentially, and figuring out how am I going to get to that other side, right? And that's where a lot of you are at. Whether you're international students currently, whether you've already graduated, or whether you're not even a foreigner, whether you found this workshop just to get some great career advice, there's this feeling of kind of being on one side and realizing that there's all this information that could benefit you to get to the other side. And so that's what we're going to focus on here today. So I'm going to talk about 3 things over the course of our time together. I'm going to talk about the struggle because we all feel it. And then I'm going to talk about LinkedIn. And then I'm going to just kind of dip our toes into the topic of interviewing. And Pat and I were going through things yesterday, and she was so sweet. She's like, Merryn, there's so much great info. We need more time. So we'll get through as much as we can. And you guys will be kind of our guide too on, are we going as deep as you want? Is there some stuff that you want us to skip over? So we want this to be as much value to you as possible. So the more that you chime in, the better. Okay, so here's what I really want you to get out of this time. I want you to get some really clear tips on how to optimize and maximize your LinkedIn profile. That's one big thing. I want you to learn some tips on how to actually use LinkedIn for networking. And then I want to teach you how to handle those first couple minutes in an interview so that you set that interview up to be successful. Hopefully that sounds good. Okay. So let's talk for a minute about the struggle. Oh my gosh. So right now in particular, I know everybody is feeling this just with the economy and with COVID and with how tough things are. The job market has always been competitive, but right now with so many qualified people having been laid off, it feels like an even more daunting task. You're trying to land the right job right now. So I just want to acknowledge that for a lot of people right now, that is just a really real reality of what we're all facing. So I feel you on that. Also, if you are an international student or somebody who has graduated and is from a different country and living in the US or in Canada, as Antonio alluded to, there are probably some big cultural differences with where you came from and the dynamic that you're dealing with, whether you're in Canada or the US or elsewhere. Just cultural norms can be a big part of interview situations and just kind of navigating the job search process. And then there's this whole other piece, which often isn't talked about, but I really try to talk about it with my students, which is the emotional side of the job search process. So I remember when I was in college or in grad school, even well before graduating, the number of times that somebody asked me, so, do you have a job yet? Or after graduating, those questions came more frequently. And so again, I just want to feel you and acknowledge how hard that is to regularly be asked. So how's it going? And I got to the point where I would tell people, I promise I'll let you know when I have an update, because it can really wear on you. And then a couple other just points here on the struggle that many of us are facing or have faced. The legal side of being a foreigner and trying to work in another country can be particularly challenging. I remember going through that myself. I came into the United States on a work visa. I had an extra year after finishing grad school where I was allowed to live and work in the US, but then I needed to get a company to sponsor me to stay here, and that was a very expensive process. And I know it's not quite as challenging to be able to stay in Canada as a foreigner longer, but it's still a process. There's still a legal side to being a foreigner and working in the US or Canada. And then also, there is some bias, and sometimes we don't like to talk about it, but it's a fact. There's some bias towards hiring decisions being made to support people who feel familiar, right? And so how do we, as people who were born and raised in the place where we're interviewing, how do we deal with that, right? How do we connect with people in a way that makes us feel valuable, makes us feel like someone who's truly going to add to the company, rather than be somebody who they're going to just say, I don't understand this person, or I don't understand their perspective, right? So I want to acknowledge all those things. Antonio, did you feel those things kind of in your journey in Canada?
Absolutely. I struggled so much. I just want to mention that I came in 2012 and I became a permanent resident last year. I'm just telling you that. So it has been a long, long struggle. And especially when you become a student after your post-graduation work permit, is a very short time frame that you have to try to get that residency, and it's very hard.
Yeah, well, congratulations for getting it.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, actually, another question, Antonio, which is, when you apply for a job, what steps do you normally take?
Okay, what steps do I take? Well, first of all, I'm gonna try to should I say me or people in general?
Let's put it more simply. What do you think most people do?
Okay, yes. People start looking in Indeed, search tools such as Indeed, Monster, and things like that. Yeah, that's the main thing I would say.
Okay, true, I agree with you. One of the other things I noticed that a lot of people do after they start that search is they start applying, and they can get pretty excited about applying, and they'll say to their friend, guess what? I applied for 10 jobs today, or I applied for 15 jobs this week. Yeah. Do you sense that as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And they expect maybe to have a response just because they apply for 5 jobs or 10 jobs, which is, we know that it's maybe not the case.
So what I want to get you guys to think about is, I want you to rethink your approach. So this is a page from my book where I set things up to get you thinking much more broadly about landing your dream job. And that one step of finding a job online and applying for it, I put that at step 4 here. So that might blow your mind a little bit, but I want you to try to rethink how you're going about your job search. We're going to talk about a good amount of this in the webinar today. So step 1 is building your brand, right? So we're going to talk about that from the perspective of LinkedIn. There are a lot of other things that you could do to build your brand. We're going to talk about step 2 a little bit in terms of how do you leverage a network on LinkedIn. But I want to also acknowledge there's a lot more you could do in terms of networking beyond what we'll share about LinkedIn. We're not going to have a chance to get to this idea of creating your portfolio. If you're interested, you can definitely check out my book to go deep into that, but that's really just the idea of you should have more than just a resume to land a job. So I want to plant that seed with you. And then obviously step 4 is the easy one, right? So you apply online, you put your name in the hat. But that is kind of, for you to see here that there's all this other work that should be happening before you get to that point where you apply online. And then step 5 is acing the interview. So what we'll do is we'll talk about kind of the beginning of the interview. But again, I want to encourage you to think about, there's a lot more that should happen in an interview that we won't have the chance to cover today. So whether you like my style and you want to read my book or check out my course, or just do some more research on your own about success in an interview, I want to encourage you to do that. Does that sound good, Antonio?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so let's start diving into LinkedIn here. And you guys heard me say at the beginning this idea of you are your own brand. So LinkedIn is this incredible thing. I call it your own virtual billboard, right? So if you're a brand, you actually have things that you're doing to market yourself. And I see 2 approaches to LinkedIn. Most people take approach A, which is they put some information on there, they put a kind of okay headshot on there, and then they start sending out invitations and they see what happens. That's probably 90% of the profiles I look at on LinkedIn. Approach B is people who view LinkedIn as their big opportunity to market themselves online. They go from A to Z, they really create an impressive profile. That's what I want to teach you how to do here today. And I know Pat's going to post this webinar, so if you don't take notes or don't catch it all, you can rewatch it and you can go and do these specific recommendations on your profile later, okay? So what we're going to do again on LinkedIn is we'll look at profiles and we'll look at these are the things to do, and then we'll also talk about how to use your LinkedIn for networking. So specific to your profile and the things you should be thinking about, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cover these 8 topics. So we'll talk about pictures, we'll talk about your headline, about your writing tense, the about section, the work experience section, connections, your LinkedIn URL, and then recommendations. Those are 8 topics within LinkedIn that, again, when I describe those 2 categories of people who have a great profile, which is very few, and people who have a pretty bad profile, which is most, these are the areas that influence whether a profile wins or not. So this is what I want to teach you guys, okay? So let's start here. Let's start with pictures on LinkedIn. So this is a woman who I know from my time at Nike. Her name is Andrea Perez. You can see here, she has a great headshot, right? So it's a clear view of her face. It doesn't matter if it's black and white or color, but it's a clear view. It's not a blurry image. She doesn't have a busy background going on behind her head. She has a warm smile happening, but she's not overly animated, and she's not looking goofy, and she's not looking grumpy, right? And she's wearing, it looks like a simple dress shirt, right? So for the work that she does, this is a great professional looking headshot. So most people get something in that space. They figure out I need a headshot and they put something there that's pretty decent. So I want you to rethink your headshot, and is it representing you well? Is it a clear image? Is it hitting on those points I just made? And I also want you thinking about that background image. So what LinkedIn will do is it will default there to LinkedIn has like a blue and white pattern that they put behind the headshot when somebody doesn't insert a background image. And I think leaving that space blank is one of the biggest missed opportunities on LinkedIn. So I think that's your opportunity to position yourself visually, right? So when you see Andrea's picture, what is it, and that background image, what does it make you think, Antonio? What's her professional life all about?
It's all about engaging with people. It's all about definitely also sports and, Nike. You connected directly to the branding of Nike. Exactly. And yeah, personally super engaging. They can do public speaking. That is very confident. Absolutely.
Totally. So what I want you guys thinking about is for yourself, what would be an image that you could put behind your headshot that would speak to what your professional passion is? So if real estate is your professional passion, perhaps you have some cool images of whether it's commercial or residential real estate. If technology is your passion, perhaps you have some interesting images of computers or code or something like that. You get what I'm saying here. And this is easy to search online for images and try some things out. And also, you may try some images out, and just the formatting of the space on LinkedIn, the image may not look good. So be sure to check it on your desktop and on mobile. And it's easy within your profile view. When you go into edit profile, you can hover over the top right corner of that space, the background space, and that's where you can make that change. Okay, I want to show you an example of somebody who maybe isn't as far into their career as Andrea is and isn't on a stage public speaking. Here's an example of a former student of mine. And great headshot, right? So, she looks engaging, she looks happy, and her passion is design and product design in particular. So she has these beautiful images as her backdrop that clearly showcase she's a creative type, right? So that already, without even looking at her profile, is telling us a story of what her passion is. The next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is the headline. And you guys jump in too. Antonio, if you don't mind managing the chat, I see people are popping up in there. So if there's anything that you want us to stop on, just chime in. So the headline, I would say second to your images, the headline is the thing that I'm going to encourage you to spend time on, because what LinkedIn will do is it will default to your current job title or current position. If you're a student or if you have a current job, that's what's going to be defaulted to that space. A lot of people don't realize that that can be changed. When you go into edit profile, you'll just go into the text box that allows you to actually change your headline. Think about this, right? So again, you are a brand. How do you want to position your brand? Because you are much more than just your job title or the current degree that you are pursuing. So LinkedIn actually gives you 120 characters to use in that space. So what I want you to think about is, what are the words that represent you best? And so in this instance, this woman, she's in the sports industry, and so she's leading with this idea of sports strategy, and then she puts a slash, and then she says purpose-driven brand development and integration, and then another slash, and then she says women and sport / sport legacy / education / consulting. So she's really giving us a lot of meat and a good feel for professionally what her expertise is, just in those 120 characters. Think about the impact of that versus if she just had her job title there, right? And I want to give you an example too of a student, because many of you, this might be your situation. So this is Mike, who's a former student of mine. And you can see, so he's leading with the fact that he's currently getting his master's degree, so sports product management master's candidate, but he's so much more than just a grad student, right? So he's positioning himself for someone who's looking at the profile as saying he's also has a background in brand marketing, in merchandising, in product, and he has a global mindset. So you guys see the difference? If you pair great images with a great headline, that's going to make somebody want to scroll down in your profile. So I really, really want to encourage you to do that.
Merryn, I have a question from Raj Sharma.
Great.
Asks, does the image have to be connected to your job?
Give me an example. So
if the image of the profile, the image on top has to be connected.
I would say it should be connected to what you do professionally. So let's say that example of Andrea Perez, who works for Nike, right? So she doesn't have to have a bunch of Nike product in the image, but I would say professionally, her passion is sport. So it should be sport, and it shouldn't be competitor product, right? So maybe it's a close-up of athletes in action, but you can't see the brand of product. Do you want to probe a little bit more on that, Antonio, or does that make sense?
Yeah. The reason I asked this question is because I have a background of Nike as well. And I now work for Heineken. Okay. And I have a background image of Michael Jordan and a quote. Now, that sort of defines me, but it's not really connected to my current organization, but sort of says a bit about my mindset. So does that work?
That's an interesting question. So I would say certainly on your, what I would call casual social media, like Facebook or Instagram, those sort of sites, I would say absolutely. I guess I would ask you, where do you want to go with your career? You know, so if you want to stay in the food and beverage industry, I'd probably try to steer you more to an image that's immediately going to say that.
Got it. I haven't really thought about it. I thought if there is an image that defines my personality in a way or the attitude, I got the point.
Yeah, I think as cool as it might be, you only have a couple seconds to tell a story, and we want them to get it right away, kind of professionally, what you're all about. So that would be my advice. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next thing I want to touch on is writing tense. What do I mean by that? So I read a lot of LinkedIn profiles, and some people will have copy on here that sounds like someone else wrote it for them. So for example, Merryn Roberts Huntley is known for her experience in business, in teaching, blah, 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 blah. Everyone knows I wrote it. So it's strange, it would be strange to have it written in third person, right? As if someone else wrote it. This is just a super quick point. Just make sure that you write this in first person. So say I, right? So in this example, I'm a modern, fearless, digitally driven, and globally savvy business leader, right? So you're speaking about yourself. That's an easy one, but you know, if you're a foreigner looking for work in the US or Canada and you write in third person, that's going to be an immediate point of disconnect with a local. So let's just avoid that. Okay. So I know I'm saying everything's important, right? So the pictures are important, the headline's important. If you win on those, the person will scroll. And this is where they're hopefully going to stop next and really get some interest in you, is the about section. And this one can be really tricky because LinkedIn gives you a 2,000 character limit, which is a long essay. Should you fill that space? No, nobody's going to read it. And if you write that much, they're also going to believe that you don't know how to edit your story in order to really showcase what's the most important parts of your story. And so I recommend here about 250 words, maybe 300. Don't write a big essay. So I've got a couple examples for you here, some strong about sections. You know, and the point with the about section is to concisely tell your story. So, you know, I'll read the first paragraph of this one. Insightful project manager with diverse experience in leading digital marketing, content, analytics, and technology teams, committed towards the development of key profit building strategies by adapting a data-driven strategic decision-making approach. And then he goes on to describe himself. And then he also has a third paragraph there with just some of his functional areas of expertise. So a good reason to do that, or to incorporate some of those words in the paragraphs above, is because when recruiters are searching on LinkedIn for candidates, those keywords will help you get found as part of their search. So whether you work them into the about section or work them into your jobs, realizing that keywords are actually going to help you get found on LinkedIn is important. Okay, let me show you a couple other examples. So this one is more concise than the last one. This is from Tegan, a former student of mine. So she's an industrial designer with extensive knowledge in bag and pack design, hard goods, trims, and raw materials. Effective project manager with strong expertise, blah, blah, blah. So you guys see how really quickly she packs a lot of value just into a couple sentences. It doesn't have to be, you know, this huge essay. And I give you one more. So Sherry is a former student of mine, and she does the same thing as Tegan. She writes a really strong, really concise about section. So she says, I grew up as a competitive swimmer, and I went on to compete as a college athlete in swimming. I hold 2 master's degrees, sports product management and sports science, product coordinator experience in the sports industry, yada, yada. She goes on to tell you a little bit more about her story. Within a sentence or two, you're already interested in learning more about her, and that's the point of this about section, is you want to catch the attention of the recruiter and the hiring manager so that they keep scrolling. And somebody who doesn't write well here, or who writes too much here, is immediately going to get passed over. And so this is a section in your LinkedIn profile that I would definitely encourage you, once you think it's in a great place, have someone else have a look at it too, just to see it, you know, if there's any way in which you could come across stronger. But these examples are great too, that you guys can refer back to. Okay, so the next section I want to touch on is work experience. So more often than not, what I see is people just listing past jobs with the company and the title. You actually need to put some information against each of the jobs and be consistent with how you format the bullet points, and don't overdo it, right? So, you know, a few bullet points for each is great, but actually under each job, write out what you were responsible for. If you can add anything around the impact that you had or the results, that would be great. And as you can see here in Lucy's profile, she added an example to the profile, which is a great idea. And that's something that LinkedIn allows you to do throughout. You can add a copy of your resume, you can add examples within your work experience. So definitely take advantage of that. Next thing I want to touch on is connections. So this is an easy one, guys. Recruiters and hiring managers are looking for what's circled in red there. They're looking for the 500 plus connection indication. What does that mean, right? That means that you're well networked. That means that you've put effort into building relationships. And it might sound silly, but it shows a breadth of network. And you could have 5,000 connections. You could have 501 connections. It's still going to show 500 plus. So I want to encourage you, if you're under that, just work towards getting over the 500 point. It might sound silly, but again, it's just an indicator of your networking skills. And LinkedIn, obviously, you guys know, has a lot of different groups. Groups can be a great way to add connections. Many groups have hundreds of members, and it's an easy way to send invitations to people just because you're in the same group and you're going to have things in common. So that's one way to quickly grow your connections. Next thing I want to touch on, guys, is your URL. So you know how I mentioned that LinkedIn defaults to that blue background behind your profile shot? LinkedIn also will default to the URL that it assigns to you. So you can, and it'll be the super long alphanumeric line of text after your name. And you can see mine down here on the right. You can see that I customized mine. So it's basically just my name, right? So when you're on your profile page, you can click on the button here that says edit public profile and URL. And then when you go in there, what you'll see is the second red box here. And you actually can just type in whatever you want there. I recommend typing your name. And if there are other people with your name, put a simple number 1 or 2 or whatever it may be after it. But again, that's just a simple indication of you knowing how to market yourself. And then one other thing I noticed too, when I'm reaching out to people on LinkedIn and I click on that button underneath their city, I click on contact info, often people don't have that completed. So make sure that you have your current email address and your current phone number, because if a recruiter is interested in reaching out to you, that may be the reason why they don't. So that's an easy one. Okay, we're in the home stretch here on this section, guys. So recommendations. Again, I look at a lot of LinkedIn profiles and I would say most of them don't have recommendations. And if you look at your profile and you scroll down to the bottom, this is where that section is. And this is really your chance to have some great feedback about you be on your profile. You don't need to have a whole bunch of them. Steve Sue has 4. And one of the keys to this is he has one, or actually a couple, that are from 2020. So you want to make sure that if you are looking for work, you have at least one recommendation on there from the current year. I look at some profiles and they have recommendations, but they're years old. That's not ideal, obviously. So LinkedIn makes it really easy for you to ask for recommendations. There's a feature within the recommendations section where you can just say, ask for a recommendation. But I want to encourage you to actually reach out to somebody via email first if you're interested in getting a recommendation from them, and be specific with them about what the skills are or the qualities are that you're hoping that they touch on, because they don't know where you're at in your career, what you're looking for, and how they can support you. And it's just an etiquette thing too, just to send them an email before LinkedIn sends them this automatic notification asking for them to write a recommendation for you. Okay, one other thing connected to recommendations is endorsements. So you may have seen people endorsing you for a certain skill. And why does that matter? So that helps you, similar to the keywords that you may incorporate in your about section or throughout your job description. The endorsements are skills that people believe you're good at, and that will actually help you come up in recruiter searches. So if you're endorsed for a skill that a recruiter is looking for and you have a lot of endorsements for that skill, that will help you come up in that search. So Antonio, how do you feel about this? I think we flew through it pretty effectively, these 8 topics. Do we have any
Absolutely.
questions?
Yeah, we do have a question from Mariana. Should I connect with people who work in 2 different fields than mine?
Well, what's the objective?
This is my question. I'm a lawyer. I've heard that if I connect with people like engineers, this wouldn't be a nice strategy, and I don't know why. So I would like to ask you about this.
I don't agree that there's a rule or against connecting with people in different industries. I think I would just, and I think some people do ask the question of what is the goal of connecting with people in different industries, right? Do they work for a company that you may be interested in working for one day, or vice versa? That could be a very legitimate reason to network. Are they part of a group that you're also part of, right? So I think if there's some point of possible intersection, and that's something that you could write when you send the invitation to connect, I think that's great. There aren't rules against lawyers and engineers or scientists and bankers. I think that's what LinkedIn is about, right? Is about bringing people together.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was saying to Pat yesterday, guys, that often when I do a workshop like this, we'll actually kind of use some different people's profiles and go through them. But we just had so much that we wanted to cover today that we probably don't have time to do that, so that we can get through the other material. But if you guys do want me to look at your LinkedIn profile, I do offer that as a service where I'll look at your profile. I'll give you personal feedback. So If you apply all of this and you still want more help, you can definitely reach out to me. But I think honestly, if you guys do all the things that we just talked about, I think that's going to put you way far ahead of most of the LinkedIn profiles out there. Okay, so any other questions before we move to the next section?
Yeah, we do have a question here. What is the best way to get the attention of recruiters located in different parts of Canada?
Yeah, I love that question, Pat. So can we cover that one in the next section on networking?
Definitely.
Let's pause that one because it's a great question.
Okay, another question just kind of popping this into. May I ask for a recommendation from my fellow students? I am finishing my undergrad studies and looking for my first internship. That's a really good one too.
Great question. So I'm going to encourage you to put yourself out there and ask somebody who would have either managed you, for example, your instructor, or if there was a teaching assistant in the class, somebody who would have a little bit more authority than a student, just because of how someone reading the recommendation is going to view it, right? And I think it's okay to ask an instructor if you've done well in the course, even if you haven't built any sort of a personal relationship with the instructor, because it can be tough in huge classes, right? But if you've done well in the class, I think it's totally fine to send your instructor an email and to say, would you be willing to speak to my work ethic or to my performance? Something that the instructor could speak to.
That's awesome. Noted. He said noted.
Okay.
All right. So I think we do pretty well on time. Like we can go over the next. Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay. Do you guys want a short break or do you want me to go right into networking on LinkedIn?
No, I can go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, great. Okay, so you guys remember that illustration of the 5 steps to landing your dream job? So we're going to focus on networking. So I put networking here as the second step, right? So thinking about building your brand and then actually building and using your network to help you land your dream job. So just like I gave you tips on your LinkedIn profile, I'm going to give you tips on how to network on LinkedIn, because it can be really uncomfortable. I've had so many questions over the years on, but Merryn, I don't even know them. What do I say? So let's dive into this. So I'm going to cover these 6 topics. There's a lot to potentially talk about, but Pat and I agreed that these topics would probably be really helpful for you guys. So we'll talk about what you post on LinkedIn yourself. We'll talk about sending invitations to people and some advice on how to do that. We'll also talk about when you're going to direct message someone, how you can handle that. And then Pat, that question you just had about attracting recruiters in different places, I'm going to talk about that as well. And then we'll talk about groups and then job postings, because I've certainly noticed over the past couple of years, LinkedIn is becoming such a hub for jobs. And that wasn't the case a couple of years ago, guys. It really was more of Indeed and Monster and those other career sites. But I think LinkedIn is starting to take over in terms of the job postings. So let me give you some advice on that too. Sound good? Okay, so let's start here then. Let's talk a little bit about what you're posting on LinkedIn. I want to encourage you again to think about really making sure you have a great profile, following those steps that we just talked about before you start posting too much stuff on LinkedIn or doing too much networking. But there's that box that LinkedIn has on the main page that encourages you to start a post and to share something. So as you're building your career, one of the things that you want to think about is, I call it curating yourself as an expert, right? So if you know the industry that you want to work in, really being somebody who is becoming an expert in that field. So whether it's sharing news of what's happening in the industry or having an opinion on something that's happened, those can be great ways to start to position yourself. And I remember years ago, before I really had a strong resume in business, and specifically where I built my career in marketing, which was the sports world, I was sharing content about what's happening in the industry. And so I would encourage you to apply that tactic to the industry that you want to work in. Another thing you can do is comment on other people's posts. So figure out who are some of the leaders in the industry that you want to work in, follow them on LinkedIn, and when they post interesting content, engage with that. Actually write something. Don't just like it, actually write a comment, right? So just getting involved in the conversation more. I'm going to suggest, in terms of how often you post, I would limit it to once or twice a week, and you certainly don't have to post that much. But as you're building your career, until you get to that point where you are viewed as an expert in a space, it probably wouldn't be appropriate for you to be posting every day on LinkedIn. People will start to tune you out. And then a couple other comments here, just realizing that hashtags will really help your post get visibility, as will tagging other people in the post. And so, for example, let's say you read an article and you find it really interesting and you want to share that on your LinkedIn feed. Tagging the author of the article would be a great approach that would get you more visibility. That's just a simple example.
Can I just add to that too, Merryn? Just about leveraging what you learn. One thing that I usually just tell students that I work with is that you can also share what you learned from this webinar. It's as easy as just posting, hey, I had a chance to attend this personal branding webinar and these are the things that I learned. So that's a really good starting point that you can do today as well.
I love that, Pat. The other thing along those lines is when someone else does great work, whether it's a coworker or your boss or, someone in your class, celebrating other people is a great way to build your network and build your visibility on LinkedIn. So I love that suggestion you had. Thank you. Okay, so sending invitations. This is also done wrong 95% of the time. So let's put some etiquette into sending invitations. Okay, so if you're on your desktop and you're sending an invitation, you're going to see this box here on the top left. Please add a note when you send an invitation to somebody. Just something simple like, wanted to connect with you, noticed that we are in the same group called blah, blah, blah. Or, I noticed your profile and really admire your background in A, B, and C. I'd love to add you to my network. Just send a short personalized note. If you're on your phone, they make it a little bit trickier to do it. And I think this is why people mess this up often. So this is a phone view of this profile of Anne McGregor. So when you're looking at it on mobile, you can click the More button. And when you click More, what pops up is these other options here. And that's where you would click the button that says Personalize the invite. And again, just write something short, but actually give the person a reason to want to accept your invitation and give them a reason to actually go look at your profile, right? Super simple, but basic LinkedIn etiquette that hardly anybody follows. Okay, so direct messaging. This is one of the scariest things for a lot of people on LinkedIn, so I want to spend a couple minutes on this. So let's say there is somebody you've connected with on LinkedIn, they accepted your invitation and you want to send them a message. Let's say that they are somebody who works for a company that you're interested in potentially working for. That's, for a lot of people, the scariest possible situation, right? So your goal there is you want to get on their radar, right? You want them to actually look at your LinkedIn profile, which we know is going to be awesome before you send any of these messages. So be specific with the subject line. Actually say something concise, like impressed with your profile, or interested in learning this, or hoping to speak to you for 5 minutes, or whatever it may be. Something very concise that will encourage them to actually open the message. When you are writing the message, you want to introduce yourself. Keep the message very short. So my name's Merryn Roberts-Huntley. I noticed your profile. I'm really interested in the background that you have in information technology. I'm actually doing some work in the IT space right now. Could I convince you to give me a couple minutes of time over the phone? That's how much I'd want to write. Then they're going to go look at my profile. If I've set up my profile well, right, hopefully they're going to give me a couple minutes. As long as I'm professional and polite, I'm not going to bother them. The worst thing that can happen is they don't write me back, right? But the other thing that I see people doing, and I have this happen often, is people will send a direct message. Well, pre-COVID, they would ask, to have a meeting, but post-COVID, they'll ask for, to set up an informational call. People who are in the position of hiring probably don't have time to offer 30 minutes to anybody who finds their LinkedIn profile. So that's where I encourage my students and people who I work with for the goal to be 5 minutes. Get 5 minutes of someone's time. Because if you can get them on the phone for 5 minutes, you're going to have the chance to tell your story, and hopefully they're going to like you, and hopefully from there you can build more of a relationship. The other thing I want to just point out here is the last bullet point there, which is recruiters are on LinkedIn all the time. Yes, okay? But a lot of people in industry don't spend much time on LinkedIn. So don't be super discouraged if you've reached out to a handful of people on LinkedIn and they aren't responding to you, a lot of people I know who work and have been working for a long time, they just don't go on LinkedIn because they're not looking for work, right? But if it's a recruiter, they're definitely on LinkedIn. Just with some hiring managers, you're going to find that they're not on LinkedIn as much. So if you want to get their attention, you're probably going to have to send them a direct email off of LinkedIn, which we'd have to talk about that, Pat, I think in a different webinar.
That's a longer conversation. Yeah, I do have a question here from John Watson. So what do you think about sending unsolicited but sincere compliments via email to people who you work with or had positive interactions with?
On LinkedIn?
On LinkedIn.
So people you work with?
People you have worked with or had positive interactions. John, feel free to correct me if I misunderstood any of
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't actually mean through LinkedIn. I was just talking about building your network through emails.
Oh yeah, I think that's great. I think it's great if you've worked with someone in the past and you want to reach out, whether it's on LinkedIn or over email, and give them a quick update on what's going on with you, give them a compliment about your experience working with them, ask them what's going on with them. I think people always respond well to that. They may not reply if they're crazy busy, but I think that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Okay, so let's get into one of the more interesting topics for many people, which is, okay, so I have this great LinkedIn profile. I'm looking for a job. I know that recruiters and hiring managers are looking on LinkedIn, but how do I connect with them? They seem like these godlike creatures who it's really hard, to get their attention. What do I do, Merryn? I get this question a lot, you guys. And Pat, it sounds like we already got this question. So I'm going to give you 3 pieces of advice here. And I really encourage you to follow these because they work. I've given this advice to a lot of people and they come back and they say it worked. So, okay. So the first one is you can search on LinkedIn. When you go into the search function, you can search for people and you can get really specific on the type of work that people do. So you could search for recruiter, or you could search for IT recruiter, or you could search for however you want to qualify that word of recruiter. And you can search for specific cities. So for our question for someone looking to build relationships with people on the other side of Canada, you could search for Toronto, you could search for recruiter, Toronto, and you're going to have a list that comes up. It's probably going to be a long list. So as you scroll that list, recruiters usually make it obvious the sort of industry and type of jobs that they recruit for. So definitely take note of that. And then also there's another trick, which is just by clicking on the profile of a recruiter, they're going to see that you have viewed them. And for a lot of people, what that ends up doing is actually creating an outreach from the recruiter to the person. So recruiters are always looking at who's viewing them on LinkedIn. And so I want to encourage you, when your profile is in great shape, to actually click on the profile of recruiters who recruit for the sort of jobs that you're looking for, because you may actually find that they will start reaching out to you. If you want to actually message them, which I do encourage you to do, again, if your profile's ready and if the recruiter recruits for the sort of job that you want, I encourage you to message them, similar to what we just looked at with sending direct messaging. Keep it short, right? So introduce yourself, tell them a couple points about your background and the sort of position that you're looking for, and ask them if they have 5 minutes to chat over the phone. The thing that most people don't realize about recruiters is that as long as you aren't in-house with a brand or an agency, recruiters will get paid to place a candidate. So as long as they're not an internal recruiter, for example, a recruiter for Target would be working on a salaried position. But if a recruiter is working for a recruiting firm, they are getting paid every time they place a candidate. So you putting yourself on their radar is perhaps doing them a favor. Okay, so don't hesitate to reach out to a recruiter if you think you're a good fit for the sort of position they recruit for. Guys, that I notice more than anything is just people are nervous. Job seekers are nervous and they doubt that they lack the confidence to reach out. And I want to encourage you to do that. Again, if you have a strong profile, which I've just given you the tips for how to update your profile, you have the right to reach out to recruiters, right? So I want to encourage you to do that. That's going to help you ultimately get into a better position being considered for a job, getting on their radar.
We have a question from Joe Tobias. What are your thoughts on recommendations, either given or received?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Joe. Nice to see you. So recommendations, I think are great. I think you should have a few recommendations on your LinkedIn profile. A couple is fine. If you have even just 2, 3, 4 is totally fine. I definitely think you should have one from the current year that you're searching for work. And like I suggested earlier, email someone who you want to have write a recommendation for you. Email them directly before you send that request through LinkedIn. It's a little bit presumptive to send a request through LinkedIn without actually sending them a personal email first. And also do them a favor and let them know what it is that you're hoping they speak to when they write the recommendation for you. Great question.
Yeah, that's actually very, 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 very important. Like I recently reached out for a recommendation, but I forgot to send like a list of skills or points that I might wanted to stress. And obviously my referee asked me, can you provide please like some points that I might want to stress? So it's very important.
And sometimes people will prefer that you write it yourself. They may just write back to you and say, Antonio, do you mind writing it? I'll edit it. Right? So that's something that you may run into, which is even better, right? Because then you can help kind of craft how that message is going to come across. Okay, so I wanted to just show you that saved search. I didn't mention this yet, but if you do a search, like if you're looking for recruiters, for example, I was searching for people at Nike who live in Portland. If that's a search that I want to run again, I can create a search alert. So if anybody else comes into the search field in terms of meets the criteria that I was searching for, I can get notified of that. So that's just another way, if you're on the job hunt, that you can get notified of people who meet certain job criteria, certain search criteria. So that's just another cool feature about LinkedIn that not a lot of people know about. Okay, so job postings. I want to talk about this for a minute because like I was saying a couple of minutes ago, LinkedIn is really becoming such a hub for jobs. So I want to explain the difference here between how you're going to see postings on LinkedIn. So on the left, what you're seeing is a job at Adidas, and if you click apply, what's going to happen there is they're going to take you out of LinkedIn and they're going to take you to the Adidas site where you're going to go through the Adidas application process. That's fine, right? But LinkedIn also does this other thing that they call easy apply. And that's basically LinkedIn vets people for the recruiter who is screening. So I want to just show you how this looks from a recruiter view, okay? So what the recruiter is going to see for the people who come up in the search is they're going to see the headshot and the headline. Again, you guys know how important I think those are. And then they're going to see candidates who meet what's called the critical match criteria. And that's based on the skills that you have in your profile, along with the keywords that you have that match what they're looking for from their job description. So again, when you think about your about section and the work experience section, if you can have an ideal job description from something that's posted, would be a position you would really want, have that in mind when you're updating your LinkedIn profile. And if there are certain phrases that are in that job posting that you can work into your LinkedIn profile and it's genuine, you working them in there, I want to encourage you to do that because that's going to really help when you easy apply through LinkedIn. That's going to really help you come up higher in the results. And then there are a couple other points here I wanted to mention on the bottom of this previous slide. So ATS, this is a thing, you may or may not be familiar with it, but it's applicant tracking software. So this is how big companies basically screen people out. So they'll take your resume, or as I'm just showing here on LinkedIn, they'll take your application through Easy Apply and they'll basically screen for candidates who match certain words, certain phrases. And so just being aware that whether it's your resume or your LinkedIn profile, that you're using language that matters for the sort of jobs that you're applying for. Otherwise, you're going to get screened out. If it's a medium to large size company, you're going to get screened out immediately. And then one other comment here at the bottom of this slide is, again, whether it's applying through LinkedIn or through a company website, be really mindful of not applying for too many positions. So the HR department will see if you've applied for a position in 5 different departments, or if you've applied for 6 different positions in the same department. It looks like, as they would say, throwing fish in a barrel, right? You're shooting fish in a barrel. You don't really know what you want. You'd kind of take anything. So definitely don't do that because, again, that will eliminate you pretty much immediately as well.
Merryn?
Yeah.
I would love a couple of questions for you from Rajiv. Should there be a different approach when you are reaching out to internal recruiters versus recruiters from an hiring firm?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say no. Just know that the agency hiring firm recruiters are going to get paid if they place you. So they have a little extra incentive, you're not going to tell them, you're not going to remind them of that, but just so you know. Whereas typically recruiters who work in-house for a company are not getting paid per placement, they're on salary. But it's the same approach in terms of getting on their radar, trying to get time with them, telling your story well, having a strong LinkedIn profile. It's the same approach. Yeah, great question.
And there is one more from Patrick. How should I approach talent acquisition managers?
Same thing. It's the same idea as a recruiter, right? So it's just a fancy way of saying it. Yeah, great question. Okay, so Antonio, what we're thinking here, and you guys chime in because I know this is a lot of material. We're wondering if you guys need a break. And then also, I would like to cover this last topic of how to handle those first few minutes of an interview. How do people feel?
I am very excited.
Break.
You're excited?
Go ahead, Pat. Go ahead.
All right, I don't know. I can't do the poll that I put together. But type into the chat if you feel like you want to keep going. You can take, 5 minutes break, whatever you feel like. Continue. Okay.
All right, let's do it. We're making good time, guys, and there's so many great questions.
Mm-hmm.
Hope you guys are getting a lot out of this. Okay. So again, let's go back to these 5 steps, right? There's a lot to think about in order to get that job. And we're fast forwarding a little bit because as Pat and Antonio and I were planning this session for you guys, we wanted to give you some of the most important pieces of helping you land your dream job, but there's a lot kind of in the middle too that we're not covering. So, okay, Antonio, what happens in those first couple minutes of an interview?
First couple of minutes. First, I will say you have to sort of try to introduce yourself in a good way, to present yourself in a good way, right? From the body language or something. And that's it. And then you start with the questioning. And usually the first question is introduce yourself. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? That's what I can say.
Spot on, Antonio. So here's the kind of scary thing, guys, that not a lot of people will tell you, but the truth is most interviews are over in those first 5 minutes. So the interviewer has already decided 5 minutes in if you have a shot or not. And they make that decision based on what we're going to talk about next, which is how you tell your story. Because most people, I'm just going to be really honest with you, most people really suck at it. It's just this thing, and I get it because I used to be so bad at it. It's so uncomfortable talking about yourself. Most of us would rather talk about anything other than talking about ourselves, and especially in an interview situation. But guys, this is something you've got to get comfortable with. And the best way to do it is to practice it, and not to practice it in an interview situation, but to take some of the learnings that you'll get here, in the next 20 minutes, and then to practice it with a family member, a roommate, anybody, right? And just say, hey, I did this webinar and part of it was learning to tell my own story. Can I practice on you? And then the other thing I would definitely recommend you do is use your iPhone, film yourself telling your story, and then watch it. So I remember when I was in grad school, I was so nervous doing anything in public. So you guys will laugh, right? That this is what I do now, but I would go red in the face. I'd get all sweaty and I just was terrified. And then somebody told me, you've got to start recording yourself, which was even more terrifying than the idea of actually telling my story in an interview. Watching yourself can be really scary. But what it did was it just started to get me a lot more comfortable with how I was going to tell my story. And those situations when I finally got to an interview, I was like, okay, it's not that bad. I've done this. So I think that's part of why it can be so nerve-wracking, is because we hardly ever do it unless we're in an interview situation. And I want you to change that. I want you, the next time you go into an interview, to be like, I got this. I've done this so many times. So let's dig into this. Okay, so what matters when you tell your story? I'm going to give you guys some advice across a few different topics, but I'm going to argue that the thing that matters the most is you connecting with the person who's listening. Sounds pretty simple, but it takes some effort. And we've all been in situations, whether it's a Zoom call, whether it's meeting someone for coffee, right? And think about it. It's usually in those first couple minutes, or even on a date, right? It's usually in those first couple minutes that in your mind, you're going, I like them. Or you're going, this is done. Right? And that's what happens in an interview. It's just funny. People never talk about it, but that's what happens in an interview. So let's give you guys the leg up in this situation. So I want to talk about 5 things, 5 ways that you can get better at telling your story, right? So we're going to cover emotionally connecting with your audience. I know it sounds uncomfortable and scary, but I promise you it's not. We're going to talk about sharing your unique strengths, and let's talk about how we can do that being a foreigner, right? We'll talk about aligning yourself with the company and the position, and then knowing how long to talk, right? You know, how long should this go on? And then we're going to wrap up this topic of storytelling with talking about confidence. Okay, so guys, I think this is really one of the most important things, which is emotionally connecting with your audience. So how do you do that? First things you need to do is you actually need to know who your audience is. Before you go to your next interview, you're going to know who you're interviewing with. Make sure you do your research on that person. Make sure that you understand their background, if there are any sensitivities, if there are any points of connection. For example, when Antonio reached out to me on LinkedIn, you know, I mean, you were so great and so professional yet warm, but we immediately connected on the fact that we both were at one point international students, right? So you had done your homework when you reached out to me. And so knowing your audience will help you build an emotional connection. And so, you know, for Antonio and I, within a couple minutes on a call, there was a connection, right? There was a, hey, you know, this is great. I want to have this conversation. Okay. This next one's really important too. So being authentic and genuine about yourself, about your story. And how can you do this? Okay, so I do a lot of work in this space, guys. I listen to people tell their story, and similar to what I was saying about LinkedIn and how, you know, 90% of profiles are pretty rough and 10% are great. This happens with telling your story as well. And the difference is the stories that are tough to connect to are the ones where people sound like they're reading off of a piece of paper. They've written something out. It's scripted, it's like a paragraph of text, and it's super boring. Is that going to emotionally connect with anybody? No, that's going to make literally within 30 seconds the person tune you out, right? Versus, I was joking with Antonio yesterday as I was making up his story, you know, so I said, you know, my name is Antonio Fata. I grew up in a tiny village in Italy, and I was this boy who, you know, who was just super passionate about computers. Whenever my grandmother couldn't find me, people knew that I was sitting, you know, in my bedroom, you know, trying to take apart the computer and put it back together. Okay, so imagine if, and I have no idea if that's true, I'm sure it's not, but imagine if Antonio was interviewing for a job in anything related to computers or technology, even engineering, right? Within 10 seconds, I'm interested in who this guy is. Granted, he's gonna stop talking about all that grandma, small town village, all that stuff at that point. Then he's gonna transition into saying, so my love for computers started when I was young. And it's no surprise that I got my undergraduate degree in computer science at UBC. And I was lucky, right out of UBC, I got a position working in customer service for IBM, blah, 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 whatever it may be, right? But do you see how if at the beginning of your story, you tell something personal, whether it's about where you're from, something about your childhood, about your history, and for people who are from another country, this can be a great way to position yourself and to say, I speak 2 languages. I was born in Shanghai, China, and I was raised in the United States. Or, you know, I was born in Florence, Italy, and I moved to Canada when I was 21 for college, right? So right out of the gates, use it to your advantage that you're different. Use it to your advantage that you have this global mindset. Use it to your advantage that you speak more than one language. You know, I was born in Paris. Now I'm studying finance in Vancouver. And probably one of the things that's most unique about me is I've traveled to 27 different countries. So it's no surprise that I'm studying tourism at the University of Washington, whatever, right? Do you see what I'm saying, guys? So within those first 10 seconds, sharing something about yourself that is memorable, that's going to form some sort of a connection that's going to pique their interest. That is so much better than saying, my name is Merryn Roberts Huntley. I have 5 years of experience doing customer service. I don't care. You just sound boring. I don't even want to hear the rest, right? Okay, so I really want you guys to think about that and how you can take something that's unique about your background, whether it's your love for, again, computers or basketballs or wherever it is, and connect that to where you want to go in your career, because your story ends up then, ideally, you plant a seed at the beginning that is something about where you want to go in the end, right? So let's say it's Antonio and it's his love for computers, right? So you tell me about when you were young and how you were always that kid, coding in the corner of the house. You're studying computer science and your dream is to work for Apple, right? So it feels intentional. That's going to make sense to the listener and it's going to create this emotional response. I want you to think about your story in that way. It's a very different approach to storytelling than most people take, but I guarantee you it's going to be something that's going to build connection with your audience. And then next thing, this third bullet point, you guys, I really want to encourage you, and it's going to take practice, but I want to encourage you to do what I just did with those random stories I threw out there. I want to encourage you to tell a story. Do not take a piece of paper and write a paragraph and then recite the paragraph. If you do that, they're going to know that's what you're doing. So you're probably sitting there going, but Merryn, I can't remember. I want to remind you, it is you who you're talking about, so you can remember, okay? And what you can do as you practice this is in your mind or on a piece of paper, have some bullet points, have some key words that are going to cue you to the points that you want to talk about. But don't write them all out, because if you write them all out, when you forget a word, it's going to be obvious that you forgot the word, and the exact words don't matter. What matters is you sharing your journey, right? And so use that trick of just having some keywords as you practice this. And then the other thing, you guys, and imagine how long you've been listening to me talk now. Imagine if I was talking like this. Imagine if there was no smile, there was no charisma, it was this. Don't do that, right? So smile, have some positive energy, right? Use your hands a little bit. Actually show a little bit of your personality. Think about how you are with the people who know and love you and bring a little bit of that warmth into the interview. And I know it's hard because you're nervous. Even if the only thing you remember to do is smile occasionally, that will create more emotional connection. How does that feel, Antonio? I know that was a lot just in that one section there. It's so important.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's you have to try. I've done it myself recently. I've done a couple of interviews and I scripted it. I have to admit it. I scripted it and sometimes it didn't sound very, very genuine. And then the last interview that I had, I stopped doing that. I tried to be spontaneous as I could and trying to engaging, and I got a better result. I got hired, so I'm satisfied.
Love it. Well done. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of overlap here, but I want to talk about, while you're telling your story, sharing your strengths, right? So as you think about those bullet points that you want to convey in your story, I want you to be intentional with what are the things about you that you want to get across, right? So again, do you speak any different languages? Are you from a different country? Does that give you, so think about it like this, does being from a different country give you a more broader perspective on the world? As the profile I showed you from Mike Liu said, does it give you a global mindset? Does it help you understand the global consumer, right? Think about how you can speak about the fact that you've lived in different places in terms of, I understand how people think differently in different places, right? Or I know how to connect with people or with consumers, right? So think about what's unique about you. Or, I did my undergraduate degree in Tokyo, right? It was an incredibly unique experience because whatever it may be, right? So use those things about you that are different to your advantage. Don't just say, I'm from Bangkok. Say what's special about that, right? Like add something to it. Give your audience a little bit more insight into who you are. And then also you definitely want to emphasize any education or training or work experience that sets you apart. So I have 5 years or 2 years of experience, doing customer service or working in sales. And the most of that experience was spent in software, blah, 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 whatever it may be. You do want to get some of those hard skills, those technical words out. And then certainly if your degree is related to the work you want to do, you want to mention what your degree is. Sometimes, like I have an undergraduate degree in sociology. How did that happen, right? I work in business. So I don't usually talk about my undergraduate degree in sociology, but I do talk about the fact that I went to McGill University. So think about the parts of your story that you want to dial up and the parts that you want to dial down based on who the audience is and what the job is. And then the other thing I like thinking about when you're framing your story is ask yourself the question of what are you known for? That can be a really unique way to start your story. So sometimes I'll say something like, I'm known to be people's secret weapon. And even just one statement about you and something that you're known for can be very enticing, right? And, can immediately grab someone's attention. So I want you to think about that. What are you known for when you think about those bullet points for your story? And then the other thing with your work experience. So I say this about resumes and having a little blurb at the top of your resume, like a summary statement, right? And then I say it certainly within your LinkedIn about section, but then I also say it when you tell your story. Make it easy for people. Summarize your experience, right? So whether you're a current student, right, and you're in your 4th year, say that. If you've graduated with a degree in biology and are currently doing an internship, say that. If you've worked for 25 years and have a background in sports and entertainment, say that, right? Like that information has to be upfront in your story so that they know, they get it, right? Don't make them do the work to have to read through your whole resume to figure out how you're packaged, what you are. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Also, a little bit of questions, but maybe at this point, I don't know if you want to address a couple of them or if you want to leave them for the end.
We're almost done. So why don't we get through the last couple slides and then let's do the questions.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
I appreciate the questions though. This is great. Okay. So this is another thing I really want you guys thinking about. So aligning yourself with the position you're applying for. So because you've looked at the job description, hopefully gotten yourself to a point where you're having a conversation with a hiring manager, whether it's somebody you networked with on LinkedIn or it's the formal interview. So you see in the job description what they're looking for, right? They're super clear about that. As much as possible, and certainly it has to be natural, connect your story with the things they're looking for, right? So, if they're looking for somebody who has digital marketing experience and has done social media ad buys, talk about the fact that, you did that for a year when you worked for Walmart or whatever it may be, right? Use that job description to your advantage and realize that it's okay to tweak your story a little bit based on your audience, based on the job. But if you have a rough framework for certain types of roles for how you're going to tell your story, that'll set you down the right path. Okay, how long to talk? I think I've got 2 more slides here, guys. So how long to talk? So I think you should have a pretty natural, like 30-second to 1-minute version of your story, so that if right now, and I'm not going to do this, don't worry, but if right now I said, hey, so-and-so, can you tell us your story? That's the version you would tell. And that would be in a networking situation, right? So a short version of your story. If you're in an interview situation, like Antonio and I were talking about a couple minutes ago, and the interview starts and they say, so tell me about yourself, I think you want to talk for about 3 minutes, give or take, right? If you go on and on, they are going to tune you out. If you only talk for 30 seconds, they're going to ask for more. So as you think about building out some bullet points against what I call a longer story, I would think go for about 3 minutes. Okay, this is just so important, guys. I can relate to challenges with confidence. Like I said, when I was in grad school, oh my gosh, anytime an instructor called on me, my face would go red. I was so nervous. And I went into my job out of grad school working for Nike, and I got thrown into huge presentations, and I was just so nervous. I hadn't been put in that situation before where I had the chance to just build confidence in those settings. And so I want to encourage you, like I said, do this practice, right? So practice with your roommate, your mom, your boyfriend, whoever, and record yourself, build your confidence so that when you're doing this in an interview situation, it's not so terrifying. But then the other thing I want to mention is, yes, what you say matters, but you remember when I put on that really boring, monotonous voice? You wouldn't have listened to anything in this talk. You would have checked out probably an hour ago if I spoke to you like that. So realizing that how you tell your story, the passion in your voice and the energy in your face, that is as important as what you actually say, because they won't hear what you say if you're not happy telling the story, right? So that's a huge, huge part of it. And then the other part, and it took me a long time to realize this, but you have the right to be there. So you have worked so hard, especially those of you who have moved to another country to study or to work. You have worked so hard to get to the point that you're at now. you have the right to be talking to whoever it is, right? Whether it's me, whether it's Antonio, whether it's an employer, you have the right to be there. And just actually taking a minute to realize that, and to realize that you are incredibly hireable. You've worked so hard to get to this point, and don't doubt yourself. And it can take a long time to build that confidence. But if it means anything coming from me, I hope that I can help you believe in yourself just a little bit more. And I hope that the things that we've talked about in terms of how you can change your LinkedIn profile, some of the tips on networking, some of the tips on storytelling, I hope those things are going to help you build your confidence. So I don't know if we talked about that. I don't know, Antonio, if you want me to do this, or if you feel like we've accomplished it. Do you want me to demonstrate a good versus a bad story? Or do you want to just go to the questions?
I can go through the questions if you want. I think, yeah, okay. Let's see. We have quite a lot of them, but let's see what we can cover. So what would be some tips for Zoom interviews? It is a bit uncomfortable to look at myself while I'm trying to talk to interviewers.
Yeah, so I would change the view on Zoom. So, sometimes I will move the screen, the little box, I will move it where it is on the screen. So you do need to speak to the camera, which is at the top of your computer screen, right? That's where you need to speak to. But if seeing yourself there is really bothering you, and you guys can try this right now, try moving me around on the screen. You can move me so that you don't have to see me right in your face. So that's one thing that you can do, is not have yourself talking at you. Another thing that you can do that I think a lot of people find helpful is to mock interview this, right? So again, record yourself on your phone, sit there talking to yourself, fake answering, mock answering the questions. Unfortunately, this is our reality for the next while, is, these Zoom interviews. So just realize that, so like right now, I'm not looking at the camera, and you guys can see that, and that looks weird, right? So I'm looking on the side of the screen. Here I am now looking at the camera. So just realizing, back to that comment about connecting, being very aware of where the camera is, seeing yourself speaking is bugging you, then move the box. If you're the only one, and you can change the view too. So try changing the speaker view. That's another thing that you can do, so that you would be looking at the person you're talking to.
All right. I think we might have time for 2 more questions. And for the questions that we might not have a chance to get to, I would take those ones and then note it down on the side, and we can send you back some of the response from Merryn, if that's okay with you. I just want to be mindful of everybody's time as well.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what do we have next for Luna?
Luna, how do you know if the interviewer is connecting with you while you are trying to emotionally connect on the new normal?
Yeah, that's a great question.
There is a real connection.
Yeah, so some interviewers are really good poker players, and they're not going to give you anything. They're going to just keep a straight face. There's nothing you can do about that. But most humans will give you some cue, whether it's a nod, a smile, they'll give you something. But you can also say at certain breaks in the interview, did that make sense? Or did I answer your question, right? And so those are ways that you can give them a chance to probe further if it didn't really work for them. But certainly looking for cues like this, or, smiling, are obvious ones. But don't let it bug you or ruffle your feathers if an interviewer stays very serious the whole time. That just may be how they are. So you still be you.
Very true. Thank you, Merryn.
Yeah.
One last question then from Alex. What if you accidentally do something really innocent in front of your interviewer?
Like, do you mean maybe?
How can you recover it? Maybe something inappropriate, yeah.
Okay.
Will that discourage the recruiters for you to get a job?
Okay, so let's think about an example. No, I was just going to say, it could be something as simple as you answered the question wrong because of a language barrier, you didn't understand the question. It could be something as simple as that. And if it's something as simple as that, again, I would use that tactic of, after you ask a question, if they're giving you a mixed response, you can ask them, you can say, was that what you were looking for? Or can I give you more information, right? So kind of probe them a little bit with a polite question. If it's worse, right? So if it's, I'm trying to think of something crazy, right? So if you burped, or maybe, is that?
Something.
Could be what if you miss the question, the most scary question of what is your weakness, right? And you still end up saying something that is a little bit that gives the impression that you're not really, you don't have the skills for the job, right?
Great question. So if you realize it during the interview, before the interview ends, I would say, Antonio, if you don't mind, can we go back to that question about weakness? I thought of something and it just makes so much more sense. I'd love to share it with you.
That's great. That's great advice.
If you don't, because sometimes we just are in a bit of a haze while we're interviewing, if you don't catch it during the interview, you can go back with an email because you're going to send a thank you email and you can say, I'd say, Antonio, if you don't mind, can I circle back on one question? It's just really been bugging me that, the answer I gave you it really didn't reflect what I wanted to share. I think that's fine. And then you should share the answer.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Merryn. Thank you. I think we have all learned so much in this workshop today. From the LinkedIn, you gave so many great tips on LinkedIn optimization, and you had a lot of detailed tips. That's so great. On how to leverage the network, our network, that was so important, and especially this last part also on how to genuinely storytell ourselves. I think we have all learned so much today. I want to really thank you, Pat, and all of you guys for participating. And I'm gonna pass it to you, Pat. Is that okay? Do you have anything else to add?
I just wanted to, quickly let Merryn talk a little bit about her book and amazing courses that she has.
Yeah.
I'll just share with you guys, if you like my style, and you can see I'm direct, I give it to you straight. I have lots of advice on all topics related to getting a job, and that's my book right there. So if you would like more help from me, my book is a great way to get it on Amazon, in pretty much all the big bookstores. So you can buy it online if you want. You can also follow me on social media. I post a lot of content on LinkedIn and on Instagram, so definitely follow me there. I also have an online course, so if you like learning like this and enjoyed listening to me teach you things, I have an online course that teaches everything from resumes to interviewing to how to negotiate pay to how to be successful after you're hired, the whole gamut, so you can check that out too. As I mentioned, I do also offer one-on-one LinkedIn profile reviews. So if you want my eyes on your profile, that's an option too. And then some people, if they want to be really, really ready for an interview, they'll hire me to do a 1-hour interview prep session with them where I coach them on how to coming across in the interview. We do a mock interview, and by the time their actual interview happens, they breeze through it. So you guys are welcome to check out my website. You're welcome to email me and connect with me on social media. And I'm so honored to have the chance to work with Empower International students. And Pat and Antonio, you guys are a class act. I'm just so grateful to have the chance to give back in this way and to connect with all of you. Thank you guys for being here. And Pat, for those who aren't familiar with Empower International students, I know you want to share a little bit.
I would love to. And actually, if you don't mind, I might just actually share my screen. It's okay. I do want to quickly really say that, all the things that you touch on today is very powerful. And, myself as international student, I struggle, as I mentioned before, but really it's a lot more than just building a good resume and a good cover letter. It's a lot about what you just said, Merryn, which is personal branding and how to connect with other people confidently. And I wanted to really bring that back to who we are at Empower as well, is that we are all international students, and I was one in your shoes of trying to understand, how to best sell myself and everything like that, and I still do struggle. So what we really believe in is learning from others, learning from Merryn, learning from myself, learning together as a community. And what we are here is to really help international students jumpstart their career in a new country, whether you're in Canada or you're anywhere else in the world planning to move to Canada. We offer our webinars all for free for career development workshop like this one. We also have the mentorship program, which we connect you with industry professionals, and I'm so glad to see some of the mentors on the call today. And then the last piece is we believe in growing together as a community. So if you want to connect with other career-driven international students or former international students, We do have a Slack group that you could join and share with your friends, and this is all for free. So it's always good to have some sort of support when you're new to the country. You already don't have anyone, especially your family. So we would love to be your extended family if you allow us to. So with that being said, I would like to close our webinar. And again, thank you, Merryn, for being such an amazing, insightful speaker today. I learned so much from just listening and, of course, like going through the preparation together. It's such an honor to have you spend almost 2 hours with us. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's late. Again, thank you, everybody, for joining. Before we leave, though, I do want to ask for a quick screenshot. So I don't know if I could do that, but if everybody who would like to be a part of the photo, this is kind of what we do. We would love to really speak about our community. So if you can turn on your camera for a little bit so we can take a quick screenshot. I better do this one right because I am somewhat, okay. Ooh, everybody's coming on. Okay, all right, so 1, 2, 3. All right, that works. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a great night. Enjoy your evening. And if you have anything that you'd like to ask, Slack group.
Yes.
Bye now.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Merryn.
Thank you, Merryn.
Thank you.
Bye.